Hello, everybody. Welcome to our next installment of Tarot IRL, in which we're having a look at the Two of Wands and the way it shows up for regular folks like you and me. Now, I should preface this episode by saying that the Two of Wands is the first card where knowing the astrology of the card really helps. And by the astrology of the cards, I mean the astrological correspondences that we inherited from the Golden Dawn, which inform pretty much every tarot deck in the English-speaking world, from the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot published in 1909 to the super cute cat-themed deck you bought last week. Now, in the last Tarot IRL episode, we talked about how the Ace of Wands, and in fact, all the Wands cards, correspond to the element of fire. But with the Two of Wands, we're about to narrow that down quite a bit. If you know your astrology, you know that the three fire signs are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, right? Now, in the suit of Wands, 3 cards belong to each of these 3 signs. So the 2, 3, and 4 of Wands belong to Aries. The 5, 6, and 7 of Wands belong to Leo, and the 8, 9, and 10 of Wands belong to Sagittarius. So far, so good? Good. The next thing you need to know is that each zodiac sign can be divided into 3. Now, if you think of the circle of the zodiac as a 360-degree circle, each zodiac sign occupies 30 degrees of that circle. And if you divide each sign into 3 parts, each of those parts occupies 10 degrees. Yeah? These are called decans, and there are 36 of them, 3 decans in each of 12 signs. And while each sign, if you know your astrology, is ruled by a particular planet, it is also true that each decan is ruled by a particular planet. It's as if the planets have little subdomains, little counties or provinces within each sign. So in the Minor Arcana of our tarot deck, there are 36 what we call Decanic cards, meaning every numbered card except the aces. And if you want to know a whole lot more about all of that, please be sure to check out my book, 36 Secrets, A Decanic Journey Through the Minor Arcana of the Tarot. Anyway, what you need to know today is that the Two of Wands is the first of these decanic cards. It corresponds to the first decan of Aries, Aries 1, which typically means from about March 20th or 21st to March 30th or 31st. So we're talking big spring equinox energy, right? That is spring in the northern hemisphere, with apologies to our southern hemisphere friends. It's just the way it is. And let us continue. What planet rules the sign of Aries? The ferocious, fiery, passionate, hot-headed, aggro planet Mars. And you know what planet rules the first decan of Aries? Also Mars, which is a mathematical coincidence which will only occur 5 times in the sequence of 36 decanic cards, but let's not get into that right now. All you need to know is that there is a lot of Mars in the Two of Wands. Okay, last bit of correspondence trivia before we get into our examples. In tarot, the planet Mars is represented by the Tower. Dun, dun, dun. The zodiac sign of Aries is represented by the Emperor. These 2 cards, therefore, also have something to do with the Two of Wands. So as we talk about these Two of Wands synchronicities, don't be surprised if you start picking up on some very martial, imperial feelings. It is no coincidence that the Golden Dawn called this card the Lord of Dominion. Okay, so let's start by having a look at Arthur Edward Waite's Pictorial Key to the Tarot text for the Two of Wands. On the one hand, riches, fortune, magnificence. On the other, physical suffering, disease, chagrin, sadness, mortification. He goes on to talk about the sadness of Alexander amidst the grandeur of this world's wealth. He means Alexander the Great. So, yeah, okay. Maybe the definition of dominion has shifted a bit in the last 115 years, but I can't say I recognize either the riches and fortune or the sadness and disease in my experience of this card, or the experiences, more importantly, of those who have written into me. The tarot is a living, breathing document, like the US Constitution should be. And I guess the tarot, at least, changes with the times. So, the first meaning we're going to talk about for Two of Wands is pretty similar to the Ace of Wands, and that is meaning number 1, new beginnings. Our listener actually says that. Like an ace, for me, the Two of Wands means launching into something new with fiery martial gusto at times. Okay, very good. We've got the martial quality in there already. Here's another. I got this card when I unexpectedly told someone I was an astrologer for the first time. It was a big coming out moment, but I felt really confident and casual about it. So, new beginning, new career as an astrologer, but also the confidence of Mars. Sometimes well warranted, sometimes not. Doesn't matter. It's still martial. So, here's another example. It's a kind of epiphany with some of that martial energy. I drew the Two of Wands reversed the morning before and the morning after the blood moon full lunar eclipse this past March. By the way, March, named for Mars. I got out of my car at 3 a.m., and there it was in the sky above me, a red full moon. So, eclipses can mark both ending and beginning points. And we have blood and the color red, which generally correspond with Mars and the sign of Aries. So that's why that one resonates with the Two of Wands. Another kind of new beginning that folks wrote into me about is the spring equinox and the start of the Decanic cycle. In recent years, a lot of people in our tarot community have started doing what's called a Decan walk, where you work with the relevant Decanic card for 10 days, starting with, in fact, the spring equinox and the Two of Wands. Okay, so here's another Two of Wands Decan-related synchronicity. This is the first year I learned of Decan walking and decided to start it on the last full day of the first Decan. I went on an utter tear and ran through as much material in one night as I could get my hands on. So I started the Decan walk, a house of fire, studying the globe all at once in a single night. I like that. So besides the fact that it's spring equinox, Decan, Decan walk, which is associated with Two of Wands energy, we also have that house of fire, fiery energy of Mars, the total commitment to whatever it is you're doing, as well as trying to learn the whole world in just one night. The Lord of Dominion, in this case, in the realm of esoteric tarot study, I guess. Similarly, I also drew the Two of Wands this year during its Decan, and on that occasion, I shared a lot of advice with people for Decan walking. And, same day, I posted the Decan start and end dates for the entire year for folks to use. Which brings up theme number 2, planning, which kind of also translates to executive decisions. When people get the Two of Wands, it's very common for us to end up doing a lot of scheduling or putting things on the calendar in advance. I got this card once when I was signing my contract for teaching the following year at the college where I work. That's one example. Here's one where one of my listeners Booked a flight after thinking hard on it for days, which has actually happened to me too, booking a flight, planning ahead, booking a flight with the Two of Wands. Here's another example. I've drawn this card when planning for 3 different people's birthday parties. That is very typical planning ahead Two of Wands behavior. Okay. Another aspect related to planning, you could say, is making executive decisions, which is, by the way, one of the primary faculties we associate with the Emperor card, which, if you recall, is associated with the Two of Wands by way of the sign of Aries. For example, I got this card when I made a last-minute executive type decision to deviate from how a course is usually taught at the college I teach at. It lightened my heavy teaching load and was much better for student learning outcomes. And I love this part. I owned my decision because it felt like the right thing to do, which is a very Emperor kind of sentiment. Okay, here's another. I finally got my mom a primary health care provider. I directly asked my doctor, rather than following the rules of the system, which were getting us nowhere. My doctor had the office call my mom directly to schedule her. So in addition to that taking executive action, there's also the scheduling and planning thing that happens with the Two of Wands here. And here is another example of planning with the Two of Wands. During Aries 1, remember that's the decan associated with the Two of Wands, first decan of Aries, I got a call to apply for a job. It would involve a career change and leaving the company I thought I'd be at and grow until I retired. I was considering the 2 career paths, one safe and more certain, the other more challenging and risky. And he compares these 2 career paths to the 2 wands in the card, the one wand that is fixed on the wall, the more safe one, and the one that's being held in the hand. I also thought of the globe the figure is holding as someone actively thinking and mapping out 2 choices and figuring out what is best. So I like that a lot because it really, makes extensive use of the imagery, the visual components of the card, both the 2 wands and the idea of the globe as the active mapping. All right. And here's one more that kind of illustrates the way the major arcana associated with the card can subtly or not so subtly show up. I got the Two of Wands the day I found out from a previous colleague that my previous boss was fired. It seemed like the firing was very karmic. So my boss, that's the Emperor, was fired, clearly the Tower, the 2 major arcana associated with the Two of Wands, and all of that showing up as a literal executive decision. So that was planning, meaning number 2, and executive decisions. Meaning number 3, next category, I'm calling 2 trees, which is a loose way of saying things that are wooden or which come from trees. Because as we've seen, wands are sometimes literally sticks. Here's one I really love from a student of mine. I pulled 2 of Wands today and found these little maple seedlings on my deck from a neighbor's tree. They are red, for Mars, and kind of look like the wands, in my opinion. So, you know how maple seedlings kind of have those 2 little wings and they're at an angle to each other? Kind of like wands. And apparently, my student says, maples are associated with Aries, according to the Witch's Encyclopedia of Magical Plants. That is great. I think I need that book. Here's another example of 2 fairly literal wands. Personally, I got the 2 of Wands on a day when I was staking tomatoes, 2 to a pot. So 2 wooden stakes at a time, 1 for each of 2 plants. Okay, here's another one. I got the 2 of Wands for a Home Depot lumber drop-off for future home projects. There you go. You've got both the wooden beams, which are basically wands, big ones, and the planning aspect as well there. So, the wooden sticks can be supersized, like in this last example of getting lumber, or sometimes they can be as small as a pair of chopsticks. One of my favorite instances of Two of Wands that seems to come up repeatedly is Two of Wands as drumsticks. Not chicken drumsticks, but drumsticks for a drum. In fact, recently, one of my students who independently came up with the idea of drumming for the Two of Wands did a great tarot card style drawing of just that. I also have ended up going to some drumming concerts myself on days that I drew the Two of Wands. And, I think that makes sense, not just because of the two wands and the sort of active nature of drumming, because wands are very active, but also the fact that drumming has historically also been associated with war, marching drums and soldiers following the drum beat into war. So yet one more sort of martial synchronicity there. Here's one that I found extremely powerful and synchronistic because the person saw it right when they saw my message asking for Two of Wands stories. In fact, interestingly enough, 3 folks got the Two of Wands on the very day I put out a call for Two of Wands anecdotes. Anyway, what this person saw was a tree and a telephone pole standing right in front of them, like the two wands in the card. Today was a new beginning of sorts, I hope. My mom finally acknowledged she needs and wants help, so I'm driving her to rehab in a few hours. This is something I've wanted for her for 20 years. These wands, one of skeptical caution to protect myself, one of passionate hope things could change in my family. Very powerful. So what's great about this to me is not just the 2 trees looking like Two of Wands, like they look in the card, but the themes like we saw before of new beginnings and like having one foot planted in the old and one in the new, which is often the case in this card that bridges one zodiacal year and the next. This is a great illustration of how a card can speak to us on many levels, and something that we might pass by every day, telephone poles, trees, can suddenly come alive with meaning. And for our final theme, we have counting to 2. Because remember, tarot likes to count. And for some reason, I've observed it happens even more in the suit of wands. Maybe it's because we make those little hash marks or tick marks that look like wands when we're counting. So anyway, one thing that happens a lot on Two of Wands days is that tarot counts to 2. For example, here's one. I drew the Two of Wands today, actually, and it showed up as 2 MacBook laptops. I work in a creative job, so the computer is like my magic wand, and I needed to switch over the old computer files onto the new computer. So for most of the day, I was wielding 2 computers as I copied over everything and sat in the middle of them. I really love that. There we see the creative aspect of wands as instruments of will, which reminds me that I have a Two of Wands manifestation as well sometimes, where the Two of Wands is a paintbrush or a drawing pencil. The writing pen, remember Ace of Wands, Uniball micro pen, for me is my principal creative tool. But the drawing instrument, whatever it is starting to be a second one. Okay, here's another example of counting to 2. Sometimes I get this card when there are a lot of 2s, and there is something special to it. For example, my mom and I, 2 people, went to a lake for a night to relax, camp, play games, and paddleboard. We played a game with 2 tile trays, paddleboarded with 2 boards, 2 paddles, etc., and had 2 margaritas 2 times. Woohoo! We were also approached by 2 police officers checking permits. 2 of everything. Very nice. Classic case of tarot loves to count. And here is one more case of tarot counting to 2. On separate days, I drew 2 of Wands and wrote psychology papers on grit and determination and interpersonal conflict. So, 2 days, 2 of Wands, 2 papers, and bonus, the martial themes of grit and conflict. Very nice. And then one final example from me of tarot counting to 2. I got the 2 of Wands one day when I got totally involved in my crazy, infamous card of the day spreadsheet. And I made a giant combo table of all my 2-card draws and how often I got them, because I draw 2 cards every day. There are 3,003 combinations, by the way. Finally, I would like to conclude our episode with a little 2 of Wands story about my husband, which I often tell people when they ask me what the 2 of Wands means for me. This did not take place in Aries season, unfortunately, but it did take place on the first day of school, which does have a particularly strong 2 of Wands type new beginning energy in my family because my husband worked as a high school English teacher. Anyway, on this first day of school in 2017, I drew the 2 of Wands in the morning, and my husband had to spend the afternoon on his first day of school in a planning meeting. Remember, planning, big 2 of Wands theme. And because it was very crowded in the room, he was kind of sitting on the side of the room when something fell off the wall and hit him on the head and gave him a concussion. Okay, so if you know your traditional astrology, the sign of Aries correlates strongly to the head. Same way that Leo corresponds to the heart or Pisces to the feet. So we've got number 1, beginning of the year, number 2, a tower-style accident, and number 3, hitting the head, which is associated with Aries. But what is even crazier, folks, is what hit him on the head was a world map, which is, given a little poetic license, exactly what the guy is holding in his hand in the 2 of Wands. You cannot make this stuff up, guys. I believe that is what we call tarot good, yes? Anyway, I'm happy to say that my husband is fine. In fact, he is happily retired from teaching, and in a generous donation of his now more considerable free time, he edited this very video. Okay, to recap, when you draw the 2 of Wands, look out for these themes. Number 1, new beginnings, including maybe a Decan walk starting on the spring equinox, if you're into that. Number 2, planning or scheduling or calendar work, which might include some executive decision-making. Number 3, look for 2 trees or branches or lumber or telephone poles or drumsticks or chopsticks. And number 4, counting to 2. All right. I hope this little investigation into the 2 of Wands has been helpful to you in terms of your own readings, whether you read only for yourself or whether you read for other people as well. Next up, and I'm sure this is no surprise, we have the next card in the Aries sequence, which is the 3 of Wands. If you have a great 3 of Wands story that you would like me to share on the air, please send it along. You can share your 3 of Wands stories with me on the Tarot Podcast Discord server if you're a Patreon member. And if you're not, I encourage you to sign up because we are having a great time over there. You can also reach me through the contact form at thetarotpodcast.com. That is our episode, and until next time, keep shuffling and don't be afraid to see what's in the cards for you.